The music pulsed like a heartbeat, shaking the earth beneath my feet. I stood in the middle of a screaming crowd, my pulse racing, not just from the bass, but from the guy standing inches away, his shoulder brushing mine. By midnight, I'd learn his secret and it would break me open. My name's Ethan Carter, 24, a graphic designer from Chicago who'd somehow ended up at Harmony Fest, a sprawling music festival in rural Wisconsin. I wasn't here for the indie bands or the overpriced beer. I'd come because my best friend, Mia, had begged me to join her, promising a weekend of finding ourselves under the stars. She was 25, a whirlwind of glitter and optimism, and I couldn't say no to her. But now, standing in a field of 10,000 strangers, I felt like a fish out of water, my sneakers sinking into the muddy grass. The festival was alive, lights flashing, drums pounding, the air thick with the smell of weed and grilled corn. I adjusted my denim jacket, trying to blend in, but my eyes kept drifting to the guy next to me. He was maybe 26, with short black hair and a leather bracelet that caught the stage lights. His name, I'd later learn, was Lucas Reed. He wasn't dancing like the others. He just stood there, arms crossed, watching the band with a kind of quiet focus that made me curious. "First time here?" I asked, shouting over the music. He turned, his dark eyes meeting mine. "Yeah. You?" "Same." My friend dragged me. I gestured vaguely toward Mia, who was twirling with some guy in a tie-dye shirt. Lucas smiled, small but real. "Looks like she's having fun." We talked, or rather, shouted snippets of conversation between songs. He was from Milwaukee, a mechanic who'd come alone because he needed a break from reality. There was something about him, maybe the way his voice softened when he mentioned his dog, or how his fingers fidgeted with that bracelet that made my chest tighten. I wasn't out. Not really. I told Mia I was by a year ago, but no one else. Chicago was progressive, sure, but my family wasn't, and I'd spent years dodging questions about girlfriends. As the band wrapped up, Mia bounded over, her braids swinging. "Ethan, you're not dancing." She grabbed my arm, then noticed Lucas. "Who's this?" "Lucas," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, his palm calloused. "Mia," she chirped. "You guys should join us at the campfire later." Lucas hesitated, glancing at me. "Maybe." The crowd started to thin, people drifting to tents or food trucks. Mia had booked us a campsite, one tent for the two of us, but she was already making eyes at tie-dye guy. "Ethan, you cool if I crash with Jake tonight?" she asked, not even pretending to feel guilty. "Seriously?" I groaned, but I waved her off. "Go. I'll survive." That left me alone, or so I thought, until Lucas spoke. "You got a tent?" "Yeah, but it's just me now." I rubbed the back of my neck. "You camping out here too?" He shifted, looking almost sheepish. "My buddy bailed last minute. I was going to sleep in my truck." I don't know what made me say it, maybe the buzz of the festival. Maybe the way his eyes caught mine again, but the words tumbled out. "You can share my tent. It's got space." His eyebrows shot up. "You sure?" "I don't want to impose." "It's fine." "Really?" My heart was pounding, but I played it cool, like it was no big deal. We grabbed our stuff and headed to the campsite, a grassy patch dotted with tents and fairy lights. My tent was a cheap blue thing, barely big enough for two, but we made it work. Inside, it smelled like nylon and bug spray. Lucas unrolled his sleeping bag next to mine, and we sat cross-legged, sharing a bag of chips Mia had left behind. "So, what's your deal?" he asked, crunching a chip. "You don't seem like the festival type." I laughed. "I'm not. I'm here for Mia. What about you? What's a mechanic doing at a place like this?" He shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Needed to clear my head. Life's been heavy." I wanted to ask more, but something in his tone told me to back off. Instead, we talked about music, about Chicago versus Milwaukee, about the time I tried to fix my car and ended up with a busted radiator. He laughed a low, warm sound that made my stomach flip. It was past midnight when the conversation slowed. The festival was quieter now, just distant laughter and the crackle of campfires. We lay down, our sleeping bags inches apart. I could hear his breathing, steady but not quite calm. "Ethan." His voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Yeah. Thanks for this. The tent. I mean." "No problem." I turned my head, and in the dim light filtering through the tent, I saw his eyes on me. There was something raw in his gaze, something that made my breath catch. Then he reached out, his hand brushing mine. It wasn't an accident. His fingers lingered, warm and deliberate, and my heart slammed against my ribs. "Lucas," I started, but he cut me off. "Don't say anything." "Not yet." His voice was shaky, like he was standing on the edge of something. Before I could process it, he leaned closer, his breath warm against my cheek. The world narrowed to the space between us, electric and terrifying. Then, just as quickly, he pulled back, rolling onto his side, facing away. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "I shouldn't have." "It's okay," I said, my voice barely steady. "Really?" But it wasn't okay. My mind was racing, my skin buzzing where his hand had been. I lay there, staring at the tent ceiling, wondering what the hell just happened and what it meant. I barely slept. The tent felt too small, the air too thick with unspoken words. Lucas's breathing evened out eventually, but I lay awake, replaying that moment, his hand on mine, the heat of his breath, the way he'd pulled away like he'd burned himself. By morning, the festival was stirring. The smell of coffee and bacon drifted through the campsite, and sunlight streamed through the tent's mesh window. Lucas was already up, sitting outside, poking at a small fire he'd built. He didn't look at me when I crawled out, but his shoulders were tense, like he was bracing for something. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice light. "Hey." He tossed a stick into the fire. "Sleep okay?" "Not really." I sat across from him, the fire crackling between us. "You?" He shrugged, his eyes fixed on the flames. "I've had worse nights." The silence was heavy, and I hated it. Last night had felt like a door cracking open, but now it was slammed shut again. I wanted to ask him what it meant, why he'd reached for me, but the words stuck in my throat. Mia saved me from the awkwardness, bounding over with Jake in tow. "You guys survived the night," she said, plopping down next to me. Her glittery eyeliner was smudged, but she was grinning like she'd won the lottery. "Barely," I muttered, glancing at Lucas. He smirked, just for a second, and it felt like a small victory. The day passed in a blur of music and crowds. Lucas stuck with us, quieter than Mia and Jake, but always there, his presence like a low hum in the back of my mind. We wandered between stages, shared greasy festival food, and laughed at Mia's terrible dance moves. Every now and then, Lucas's arm would brush mine, or our eyes would meet, and my pulse would spike. By late afternoon, The sky was turning golden, and the main stage was gearing up for the night's headliner. Mia and Jake ran off to grab drinks, leaving me and Lucas alone again. We found a spot on a hill overlooking the stage, sitting on a blanket I'd brought. The crowd below was a sea of color, moving like waves. "You ever feel like you're pretending?" Lucas asked suddenly, his voice low. "Pretending what?" I turned to him, caught off guard. He leaned back on his elbows, staring at the sky. "Like you're someone you're not. For other people." My stomach twisted. I knew exactly what he meant. I'd spent years playing the part of the normal son, the guy who didn't make waves. "Yeah," I said. "All the time." He looked at me then, his eyes searching. "What's your story, Ethan? What are you hiding?" The question hit like a punch. I wanted to tell him about the late nights questioning myself, about the fear of my dad's disapproval, about the way I'd buried my feelings for years. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "What about you? What's your deal?" He laughed, but it was hollow. "You don't give up easy, do you?" "Nope." I grinned, trying to lighten the mood. "Spill." He hesitated, then pulled off his leather bracelet, revealing a thin scar across his wrist. My breath caught. "Old mistake," he said quietly. "I was 19. Thought I could outrun who I was." I didn't know what to say. The scar was faint, but it carried a weight that made my chest ache. "You okay now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Most days." He slipped the bracelet back on, his fingers shaking slightly. "But it's why I'm here. Trying to figure out how to live with it. With me." I wanted to reach for him, to say something that would make it better, but I didn't know how. Instead, I said, "You're not alone. You know." His eyes met mine, and for a moment, the world fell away. Then he looked down, picking at the grass. "You're dangerous, Ethan Carter." "Me?" I laughed, nervous. "I'm just a guy who can't dance." He smirked. "Sure you are." That night, we ended up back at the tent. Mia was off with Jake again, and the campsite was quieter, the festival winding down. Lucas and I sat outside, sharing a beer and listening to the distant thrum of music. The air was cool, and I pulled my jacket tighter. "You cold?" he asked. "A little." He scooted closer, his shoulder against mine. "Better." My heart was racing again. "Yeah." We sat like that for a while, the silence comfortable but charged. Then he turned to me, his face half lit by the fire. "Last night," he said, "when I didn't mean to freak you out." "You didn't." I lied. He raised an eyebrow. "Liar." "Okay, maybe a little." I laughed, and he did too. Then his expression softened. "I don't do this," he said. "Get close to people. It's messy." "Tell me about it." I thought of my family, of the secrets I'd kept. But maybe messy's okay. He looked at me, his eyes dark and unguarded. Then, slowly, he leaned in. This time, he didn't pull back. His lips brushed mine, tentative at first, then deeper, like he was letting go of something. My hands found his face, and for a moment, everything made sense. When we pulled apart, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. "Whoa," I whispered. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough. "Whoa." The kiss lingered in my mind like a song I couldn't shake. We didn't talk about it. Not right away. Instead, we crawled into the tent, lying side by side, the air between us electric. I could feel the heat of his body, even through our sleeping bags, and every rustle of fabric made my nerves spark. Morning brought a new kind of tension. Lucas was quieter than usual, his eyes avoiding mine as we packed up for the day. I wanted to ask what he was thinking, but the words felt too big, too risky. Instead, I focused on the festival and the music, the crowds, the distraction of it all. Mia noticed something was off. "You okay?" she asked as we grabbed coffee from a food truck. Lucas was a few steps ahead, talking to Jake about some band. "Yeah," I said, but my voice betrayed me. She raised an eyebrow. "Spill. Ethan. What's going on with you and Mr. Mysterious?" "Nothing," I said too quickly. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't push. Mia knew me well enough to give me space, but I could tell she was watching us. The day was a whirlwind of concerts and sunburn. Lucas stayed close, but there was a distance in him now, like he was pulling back. It made my stomach churn. Had I done something wrong? Was the kiss a mistake? By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. We were back at the campsite, the sky a deep purple. Mia and Jake were off dancing, leaving us alone again. I sat next to Lucas, the fire casting shadows across his face. "You've been quiet," I said, trying to sound casual. He poked at the fire with a stick. "Just thinking." "About what?" He didn't answer right away. Then, finally, "About last night." "About this." He gestured vaguely between us. My heart sank. "Regret it?" "No." His voice was firm, but his eyes were conflicted. "But I don't know how to do this, Ethan. I'm not out. Not to anyone." The confession hit me hard. I'd suspected as much, but hearing it was different. "Me neither," I admitted. "Not really. Just Mia." He looked at me, surprised. "Your family doesn't know?" I shook my head. "My dad, he's old school. Thinks being anything but straight is a choice. A sin." Lucas's jaw tightened. "Mine too. Except he's got a temper. Last time I even hinted at it. He stopped, his hand brushing the scar under his bracelet. I wanted to reach for him, but I didn't. "I'm sorry." He shrugged, but it was forced. "It's why I keep people at arm's length. Safer that way." "But you kissed me," I said, my voice barely steady. "Yeah." He looked at me, his eyes raw, and it scared the hell out of me. The honesty disarmed me. I wanted to tell him it scared me too, that I'd spent years hiding, afraid of what it meant to feel this way. But before I could, he stood. "I need some air," he said, and walked off into the dark. I sat there, the fire crackling, my mind a mess. Part of me wanted to chase after him, but another part, the part that had spent years building walls, told me to let him go. He didn't come back for hours. When he finally did, it was past midnight, and I was still awake, sitting outside the tent. His hair was damp, like he'd splashed water on his face, and his expression was unreadable. "Where'd you go?" I asked. "Just walked." He sat next to me, closer than before. Needed to think. "About us." The word hung in the air, heavy and real. "I don't know what this is, Ethan, but I know I don't want to run from it." My heart leapt, but I was cautious. "You sure? Because you looked like you were ready to bolt earlier." He laughed, a little bitterly. I was. But then I kept thinking about you. About how you make me feel alive. I didn't know what to say. My whole life, I'd been taught to hide this part of myself, to bury it deep. But sitting there, under the stars, with Lucas looking at me like I was the only thing that mattered, I felt something shift. I'm scared too, I admitted. But I don't want to run either. He reached for my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine. It was different from the night before, less impulsive, more deliberate. We didn't kiss, didn't need to. That touch was enough, a promise of something neither of us fully understood yet. We stayed like that until the fire died down, the festival humming softly in the distance. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The next morning, the festival felt different. The music was louder, the colors brighter, like the world had turned up its volume. Lucas and I didn't talk about what we'd said, but there was a new ease between us, a quiet understanding. We stuck together all day, sharing looks that said more than words could. Mia noticed. Of course. You two are cute, she whispered when Lucas was grabbing us water. Shut up, I muttered, but I couldn't hide my smile. The day was perfect, too perfect. Maybe. We danced to a folk band, our bodies close in the crowd. And for once, I didn't care who was watching. Lucas's hand found mine, and I let it stay there, my heart racing but happy. But perfection doesn't last. That night, as we sat by the fire, a group of guys from a nearby campsite wandered over. They were loud, drunk, the kind of guys who thought they owned the place. One of them, a broad-shouldered dude with a backward cap, zeroed in on us. You two look cozy, he said, his voice slurred but sharp. Lucas tensed, his hand slipping from mine. Just chilling, he said, his tone neutral. Backward cap smirked, looking at his friends. Chilling? Huh? You sure about that? My stomach dropped. I knew that tone, that look. I'd heard it in high school, in locker rooms, in my dad's voice when he talked about those people. Let's go, I said quietly to Lucas, standing up. But backward cap wasn't done. What? You guys a couple or something? The word hung in the air. A challenge. Lucas's jaw clenched, and for a second, I thought he might swing. Instead, he said, "What's it to you?" The guy laughed, but it was mean. Just curious. Man. No need to get defensive. His friend snickered, and I felt the heat rising in my chest. We're just trying to enjoy the festival, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Whatever, backward cap said, but he didn't move. His eyes flicked between us, like he was waiting for something. Lucas grabbed my arm. Come on, he said, pulling me toward the tent. We didn't talk as we climbed inside, the air thick with tension. I could hear the guys laughing outside, their voices fading as they wandered off. Lucas sat with his knees pulled up, his hands clenched. You okay? I asked. He didn't answer right away. I hate that, he said finally. The way they look at you. Like you're wrong. I know. I sat next to him, our shoulders touching. But they're gone now. He shook his head. It's not just them. It's everywhere. My dad, my town, my whole damn life. I didn't know what to say. I'd faced my own share of judgment, but Lucas's pain felt deeper, rawer. You don't have to go back to that, I said. Not alone. He looked at me, his eyes searching. You mean that? Yeah. I took his hand, and this time, He didn't pull away. We lay down, the tent a small sanctuary from the world outside. But sleep didn't come easy. Past midnight, I woke to Lucas sitting up, his breathing uneven. "Lucas," I whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small notebook, its pages worn and creased. He hesitated, then handed it to me. "Read it," he said, his voice barely audible. I opened it, my hands trembling. The pages were filled with sketches intricate, beautiful drawings of faces, landscapes, hands. But it was the words that stopped me. Pages of poetry, raw and aching, about love, shame, fear. One line stood out. "I am not a mistake, but I'm still hiding." My throat tightened. You wrote this." He nodded, not meeting my eyes. "It's how I deal when things get heavy." I set the notebook down, my heart pounding. "You're not a mistake, Lucas." He looked at me then, his eyes wet. "You don't know how much I want to believe that." I leaned in, kissing him softly, my hands framing his face. It wasn't like the night before. This was slower, deeper, like we were both trying to say something words couldn't. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine, his breath shaky. "I'm glad I met you," he whispered. "Me too," I said, and for the first time, I meant it with every piece of myself. The festival's final day was a blur of music and heat, but the weight of Lucas's notebook stayed with me. His words, his sketches, they were a window into a part of him he'd kept hidden, and sharing them felt like a trust one didn't want to break. We stuck close, our hands brushing more often, our smiles easier. But there was an undercurrent of fear, too, not just from the run-in with backward cap, but from what came next. Tomorrow, the festival would end, and we'd go back to our lives. Mia pulled me aside that afternoon, her eyes serious. "Ethan, what's going on with you and Lucas? And don't say nothing." I sighed, glancing at Lucas, who was laughing with Jake over some dumb joke. "I don't know, Mia. It's complicated." "Complicated how?" She crossed her arms, her glittery nails catching the light. "He's not out. Neither am I, really. And we live in different cities. Plus, you know how my family is." She softened. "You like him, don't you?" I didn't answer, but my face must have given me away. She hugged me, quick and fierce. "Then don't let him go, okay? You deserve to be happy." Her words stuck with me as the day wore on. That night, the festival's closing act was a soulful indie band, their music swelling under the stars. Lucas and I stood in the crowd, closer than ever, our fingers laced together. For once, I didn't care who saw. After the show, we wandered back to the campsite, the air cool and quiet. We sat by the fire, the festival's energy fading into the night. Lucas was quieter than usual, his eyes distant. "What's wrong?" I asked, nudging his shoulder. He didn't answer right away. "Then, tomorrow, we leave, and what happens then?" The question hit like a brick. I'd been avoiding it, too caught up in the moment to think about the future. "I don't know," I admitted. "What do you want to happen?" He looked at me, his expression raw. "I want this. Us. But I'm scared, Ethan. My life back home, it's not like this. People like me don't get happy endings." "That's not true," I said, my voice fierce. "You deserve better than that." He smiled, but it was sad. "You make it sound so easy." It's not, I said. But maybe it's worth trying. He didn't respond, just stared into the fire. The silence stretched, and I felt a knot forming in my chest. Was this it? Was this all we'd have? Past midnight, we climbed into the tent. I thought he'd pull away again, but instead, he turned to me, his eyes steady. I don't want to lose this, he said. But I need time to figure myself out. I get it, I said, though it hurt to hear. I'm not going anywhere. He reached for me, his hand resting on my chest, right over my heart. You're too good for me, Ethan Carter. I laughed, trying to lighten the mood. Nah. I'm just stubborn. We kissed again, slower this time, like we were memorizing each other. When we pulled apart, he curled against me, his head on my shoulder. It was the closest we'd been, and it felt like a promise, fragile but real. The next morning, the campsite was chaos, people packing up, tents coming down, the festival's magic fading. Lucas and I exchanged numbers, our hands lingering as we said goodbye. He had to get back to Milwaukee, and I had a long drive to Chicago. Text me, he said, his voice low. I will, I promised. As I watched him walk to his truck, his leather bracelet glinting in the sun, I felt a mix of hope and fear. This wasn't the end, I told myself. But the world outside the festival was bigger, messier, and I wasn't sure either of us was ready for it. Back in Chicago, the city felt too loud, too gray. The festival had been a bubble, a place where I could be someone braver. But now I was back to my tiny apartment, my graphic design gigs, my life. I texted Lucas that night. A simple made it home. You. He replied an hour later. Yeah. Missed the tent. We texted every day after that. Small messages at first, jokes about the festival, pictures of his dog, a scruffy mutt named Max. But soon, our conversations deepened. He'd send me lines from his notebook, fragments of poetry that made my heart ache. I'd tell him about my designs, about the pressure to keep up appearances with my family. One night, he called. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying. My dad found out, he said. About the festival. About us. My stomach dropped. How? Someone saw us. A friend of his was there. Told him he saw me holding hands with a guy. I gripped the phone, my mind racing. What did he say? He called me a disgrace. Said I'm not his son anymore. His voice broke, and I wished I could reach through the phone and hold him. Lucas, I'm so sorry. It's not your fault, he said, but he sounded hollow. I don't know what to do. Come to Chicago, I said before I could stop myself. Stay with me. He laughed, a little shaky. You're crazy. Maybe. But I mean it. There was a long pause. Then, I'll think about it. The next few weeks were a blur of worry and hope. Lucas's texts became sporadic, his words heavier. I knew he was struggling, but he wouldn't let me in. Not fully. I tried to focus on work, on Mia's endless questions about him, but he was all I could think about. Then, one night, he showed up at my door. It was past midnight, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days, his hair messy, his eyes red. He was carrying a duffel bag and his notebook. Nothing else. Lucas. I stepped aside, letting him in. I couldn't stay there, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Not after everything. I hugged him, and he held on like he was drowning. We didn't talk much that night, just sat on my couch, his head on my shoulder. I could feel the weight of what he'd left behind: his family, his home, his whole life. The next morning, over coffee, he told me the rest. His dad had thrown him out, told him never to come back. He'd been sleeping in his truck for days, trying to figure out what to do. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Didn't want to drag you into my mess," he said, staring into his mug. "You're not a mess," I said fiercely. "And you're not alone." He looked at me, his eyes softening. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." He stayed with me after that, sleeping on my couch, his stuff in a corner of my tiny living room. It wasn't easy. My apartment was cramped. My job was demanding, and we were both navigating something new. But every night, we'd talk, or he'd show me a new sketch, and it felt like we were building something. One night, he read me a poem from his notebook, his voice steady but raw. It was about the festival, about the moment we kissed, about finding light in the dark. When he finished, I kissed him, and it felt like coming home. Living with Lucas was like learning a new language. Some days were easy, lazy mornings with coffee, evenings sketching together, his laughter filling my apartment. Others were harder. He'd get quiet, his eyes distant, and I knew he was thinking about his dad, about the life he'd left. I tried to give him space, but it wasn't always enough. One night, I came home from work to find him gone. His duffel bag was still there, but his notebook was missing. Panic hit me hard. I texted him, called him, got nothing. Hours later, he walked in, his face pale, his hands shaking. "Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Needed to think," he said, setting his notebook on the table. "Went to the lake." "You scared me," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm sorry." He sat down, his shoulders slumped. Sometimes I don't know if I can do this. Be this." I sat next to him, my heart aching. "Be what?" "Yourself." He nodded, his eyes wet. I keep hearing his voice. My dad's. Telling me I'm wrong. "You're not," I said, taking his hand. "You're not wrong, Lucas." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something like hope in his eyes. "How do you do it? How do you keep going?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But you make it easier." He kissed me then, hard and desperate, like he was trying to anchor himself. When we pulled apart, he whispered, "I don't deserve you." "Shut up," I said, smiling. "You do." Things got better after that. Lucas started looking for work, picking up shifts at a garage nearby. I introduced him to Mia, who declared him officially cool and dragged him to karaoke nights. Slowly, he started to smile more, to open up. But the past wasn't done with us. One evening, my phone rang. It was my dad. I hadn't talked to him in months, not since I'd dodged his questions about my plans for the future. "Ethan," he said, his voice gruff. "We need to talk. Your mom's worried." "About what?" I asked, though I knew. "About you. Living with some guy. People are talking." My heart sank. I glanced at Lucas, who was sketching at the table, oblivious. "It's my life, Dad." "It's not right," he said. "You know that." I hung up, my hand shaking. Lucas looked up, his brow furrowing. "You okay?" I told him everything, me dad's words, my fear, the weight of it all. He listened, his hand on mine, and when I finished, he said, "You don't have to face him alone." The next day, I called my mom. I told her about Lucas, about who I was. She cried, but not out of anger. She said she just wanted me to be happy. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Lucas and I kept building, day by day. We weren't perfect either. There were fights, doubts, moments when the world felt too heavy. But we faced it together, and that made all the difference. A year later, Lucas and I stood in a small Chicago park, the skyline glittering behind us. It wasn't a festival, but there was music, a street performer playing a guitar, the notes soft and hopeful. We were different now, stronger, our hands clasped without fear. Lucas had started therapy, working through the scars of his past. He'd gotten a steady job, his sketches turning into a small art show at a local gallery. I'd taken on bigger design projects, even started a blog about my journey, hoping it might help someone else. My dad still didn't get it, but my mom came around, inviting us for dinner, asking Lucas about his art. It wasn't easy, but it was progress. That night in the park, Lucas pulled out his notebook, now filled with new pages, sketches of us, of Chicago, of a life we were building. He read me a poem, his voice steady, about love that didn't hide, about finding home in another person. When he finished, I kissed him, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "You're my home," I said. He smiled, his hand brushing my cheek. "And you're mine." The festival had been a spark, a moment that changed everything. What Lucas did after midnight, reaching for my hand, sharing his notebook, choosing to stay, had left me shaking, not with fear, but with the weight of possibility. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were living, fully and unapologetically, together.